Is a joint work with Shravan. Um, Today's topic is edge-aware interdomain routing. So this is an interdomain routing based on Mobility First, which is a future internet architecture. It's an NSF-funded project that has been going on in WinLab for a couple of years. And today, in the next 20 minutes, I'll try to explain all the key features of the interdomain routing aspect of the project. So to start with, I'll give a very brief overview of Mobility First, just to highlight the key features of Mobility First. That would help me in the next slides to explain the EIR, or the interdomain architecture features. So to start with, the Mobility First architecture is name-based. So what I mean by that is every network attached object has a unique name, and there's a clean separation between the name and the location of the object, or where the entity is connected to the internet. And this location ID separation is very different from the way internet works right now, which is using IP, where a device gets an IP address, which is its location as well as its identifier. So when for a mobile device you change positions, you connect to some other network, you get a new IP, which becomes your new identifier and as well as your new location. For Mobility First, every network attached object has a unique identifier, which is flat. It's based on your public key, and it's unique throughout the lifetime of the entity. And then we have the Global Name Resolution Service, which is right here. What it does is it maps this GUID, or the globally unique identifier, to its current position in the internet. And as the device or the entity moves, this mapping keeps changing in the GNRS. So this is how Mobility First handles mobility as such. So the identifier remains unique, and as you move, your mapping keeps changing in the GNRS. In addition to that, there are other features such as the routers have storage, as well as we have a very reliable link layer hop-by-hop transport. This is very crucial for wireless scenarios where you have varying link quality as well as intermittent misconnections. So, before I delve into interdomain architecture, I want to briefly say what happens for intradomain, which is within a network. What is the routing scheme that takes place, and then I can move on into what happens when you have multiple networks connected together. So in Mobility First, intradomain uses GSTAR, which is generalized storage aware routing. It is essentially a link state routing, so it's OSPF style, but it also has a few unique features. So every router within the network have a global information of what happens to all the other routers. And what they know is the expected time of transmission of the link quality. So this is exchanged in link state advertisement, which is flooded within the network. So every router knows the ETT of the links throughout the network. In addition, as I mentioned, Mobility First routers have in-network storage. So GSTAR allows a router to take the decision if the link quality goes down, which is the short-term link quality in comparison to the long-term link quality. It can temporarily store the packets and forward it when the link becomes better, or for disconnection. For example, in this figure, we highlight what happens in a disconnected scenario, where a mobile device is connected to an access point up there, and then when it disconnects and moves to a new location, the data which is in flight is temporarily stored and then rerouted. So that's the intradomain architecture. Move on to what happens when you go into interdomain or different networks connected together. In the current interdomain scenario, there are a lot of challenges in the sense that it doesn't support very well mobility in the first place. So if you're moving from one location to another, your IP address changes, and current BGP doesn't perform very well with that. It also has very poor support for dynamic AS formation. What I mean by that is if you have a group of devices, say a group of vehicles, and they dynamically form an ad hoc network, it's very difficult for dynamic autonomous systems to form and connect to the main internet, move on, and do things like that. Also, it doesn't support multipath. What I mean by that is BGP allows a single path to every IP prefix. So for example, if you consider most mobile devices which have multiple interfaces available, it doesn't provide the functionality to expose multiple paths at the same time. And of course, it has no visibility of intra-domain. So whatever happens within an AS, for example, the G-star or the OSPF style routing that happens internal to the AS, there is no mechanism to expose that to different entities which perform autonomously. These are some of the challenges that we are trying to address with our EIR architecture. So the key point, it's called edge-aware inter-domain routing. So why do we need edge awareness? These are two use case scenarios. There are many more, but I'd like to highlight just two of them. For one, like I explained, multipath. So we have a very simple example of a mobile device. So typically a phone sees 3 to 5 networks at the same time. And it also has multiple network chips available, just that you don't have the functionality in the routing layer to allow it to connect to multiple interfaces and route packets at the same time. So this is necessary for scenarios like multi-homing, where you can use multiple interfaces and transmit data at the same time. And this is something that needs to be supported in the inter-domain, because all these different networks belong to different entities and they need to collectively transmit data for a single flow to a single device. This functionality is not supported, and we try to address that using EIR. The other aspect, which I also described in my previous slide, is ad hoc network formation. So you can think of groups of cars forming ad hoc networks and then moving across a highway, and as they're moving, they're connecting to different ASs, which we call edge peering. And this is not supported through BGP or current internet architectures. And this is also what we would like to support using our inter-domain architecture. So the key features. For one, we try to expose the internal topology of the network external to the AS. But AS can have thousands of routers, and it's not feasible to expose the entire topology, plus they each belong to a different domain. So it might not make sense. Not every AS would want to expose all their routers and all their link quality information. So what we have is aggregated view of the network. We call it aggregation nodes and virtual links. So each AS has the flexibility of exposing as much or as little as they want. So what they can do is they can aggregate a group of routers together as an aggregated node, and all the links and their link quality information in an aggregated fashion as VLinks. And what they essentially expose is virtual topology sort of scenario where you have A nodes and VLinks connected to each other. And like I mentioned, there is a flexibility in how much more or how much less you want to let the other networks know, and there's an advantage and a disadvantage on either ways. So if you expose more, others might want to route traffic more through your network. But on the other hand, if you have some economic relationship with other ASs, you might want to let them know what your link qualities are, because that might bring you more money. How are these topologies distributed throughout the internet? We have what we call a network state packet. What this contains is basically your internal topology in terms of A nodes and VLinks, and also what are the A nodes of the neighboring ASs that are connected to you. And this is distributed in a link state fashion, so every AS in the internet gets an NSP from every other AS, which gives them the aggregated topology. It also gives you VLink properties which are not supported in the current internet. So you have in inter-domain architecture, BGP, there's no way of saying how good or how bad the link is. All you say is, I can reach this destination IP prefix which is 10 hops away from me, and 10 hops means 10 AS hops, which has no notion of how, if the link is fast, if the link is slow, if the AS is congested. So we try to expose a bit more parameters, which are bandwidth, availability, and of course the link estimated time of transmission. You can also have some additional parameters, such as you can expose functionalities like this is a Wi-Fi A node. So you have some idea that if it's an edge A node, it might have a lot of variability because it's Wi-Fi. Or you can say this is a storage capable A node. So you know that you can do caching in that A node and additional functionalities like that. And then of course, using all these link state messages, the NSPs, you perform shortest path routing to find the global view of the entire internet, but in terms of A nodes and V-links. The key question that arises is that now that you have link state advertisements flooding throughout the whole internet, what's the scalability? So that brings us to the telescopic flooding. What we try to do is we try to dampen the amount of network state packets that flood through the internet. And the way we do is through a telescopic function. What it says is when you receive a packet, when an AS receives a network state packet, it holds it for a specific amount of time before it forwards it to its neighbor. This sort of dampens the flood that goes through the network. And we have different functions by which determines how much time should you hold before you forward the packet. And what we use is a constant exponential constant function. Basically, for a few hops, you hold it for a constant time, and then as you move further and further away, you exponentially increase the amount of time you hold the packet. And then again, it's a constant, of course. We did some initial evaluations on that as to how much is the routing overhead and how was the settling time. By settling time, we mean we had a 20-node AS topology, and what we wanted to see at what point all the routing tables settled down to everyone had the same global view. And what we found were we were varying the parameters alpha and beta in this equation, and what we found that for a value of alpha equal to 2 and beta equal to 3, which is right there, the blue point up there, you see a moderate amount of overhead with a moderate amount of settling time. So the thing is, if you have a very high, if you say, for example, if you keep increasing beta, which is you move this side, you have a low overhead, but at the same time, it takes a lot of time for all the routing tables to saturate. On the other hand, if you start increasing alpha, the routing tables settle down very fast, but then there's a high overhead in the system. So you want to keep the telescoping function such that there's not so much overhead, as well as it's a trade-off basically between overhead and how fast the routing tables settle down. Yes?
Definitely scalability is an issue, right?
Right.
The way BGP is designed, especially for this reason, where we say, it has to be scalable.
Right.
We are trying to, break it somewhat and say, okay, we want to introduce this new procedure, EDR.
Right.
We want to reduce the overhead, so let's stop the function and then pour it off.
Right.
But the key concern is, aren't these routes becoming more obsolete now, especially given the wireless nature of the network? We pour it off for 100 seconds, I think that's a significant amount, depending on what you're looking at. So.
Exactly, and that actually brings us to the next point, what we call late binding. So what we try to do is, we have the global name resolution service, which maps the location of the device with its identifier, the GUID location. And we can have a functionality which is called late binding. By that, what we mean is, initially when the source starts to transmit data, it looks up the GNRS to see where the location of the device is. And it starts to transmit towards the destination. But as the packet moves hop by hop towards the destination, the routing information becomes fresher and fresher. And then at some point, you can do a relookup. Worst case, you can do it at a failure. So that's the worst case scenario where you had a stale routing information and you went to the last hop and you see the destination has moved. And then you look up the GNRS, and around that area, around that region, you have a fresher routing information. So you can reroute. But the better scenario is that if you have an estimation of what speed the device is moving, which is an approximate dwell time, somewhere along while you're moving towards the destination, you can do a relookup and you can reroute the packet, which is what is shown here. So there's an initial lookup at L1 who wants to send data to L2. and it keeps sending it towards the destination, and at some point, which if you are very accurate, it can be the exact point where, right here, which is shown, which is a very idealistic scenario, you can do another lookup and you can change directions. But the late binding support along with the GNRS is is a key point where you prevent situations like the one you were mentioning. Okay. So the final aspect of the design, which is to deal with transit traffic for transit ASs. Transit ASs can be pretty large, and depending on the amount of traffic it carries, the transit traffic might compete with the local traffic, and by local traffic I mean traffic generated locally, as well as traffic that is destined for destinations within the transit AS. So there's another aspect as to internal routers in a transit AS have no notion of what the transit traffic path is. So if an internal router receives a packet with a destination not belonging to its own AS, it is no way to route it. So our approach to this is the border routers in a transit AS could generate a predefined transit path. You can think of it as a highway path through which the transit traffic goes, and it generates a specific label for that path, and it pushes a control message, which is sort of a route injection packet, saying if the label is L1, this is the path it should follow. If the label is L2, this is the path it should follow, and so on. And the internal routers build up a fast path table based on the labels and the next hop. So all they need to know is if this is the label, this is the next hop I should send it to. And then when a transit packet comes in, what the border router does is it marks it as a transit traffic, attaches a label and pushes it out. So that internal routers can just do a fast lookup and forward it to the next hop. This also has some other advantages, like I mentioned, that the transit traffic doesn't need to compete with the shortest path, and if the transit AS wants, it can route the traffic through transit paths which are separate. Also, it needs to somehow expose this transit traffic path in its network state packet, which I mentioned before, because if I'm a source in a different AS, I would like to know what path my transit traffic will go through. So that somehow needs to be exposed in the network state packet in terms of the A nodes. And then the internal routers in the transit AS can do a label-based forwarding. This is what we call a cut-through paths. And we can also impose policies based on this. So local policies, for example, this AS might have some local policy-based arrangement with AS3, and then it might generate a path just for the traffic transiting from AS3 through itself. And it can attach a label and introduce a different path altogether based on local policies or policy agreements with your neighbors. So the next two slides are sort of bringing it all together as to going through a toy example and showing what are the different routing tables at each hop, and what are the routing tables that are accessed for transferring data from a source to a destination. So this is the one where AS2 is a transit AS, but it receives some data which is destined for a destination within itself. So the source generates a packet. It goes to the router it's directly connected to. G star is the intra-domain routing, which I'll explain briefly. So R1 would look through its G star and find the default border router. In this case, which is R2, the border routers are marked as such. The R2 will find that the destination is not within its own AS, so it should look through its EIR or the A node based forwarding table. So it looks through EIR and sees that the destination A node is A node 3 and the next hop is A node 2, and it forwards it to R3. R3 sees it's a local traffic, and henceforth it just goes through the shortest path, which could be either the blue one or the red one depending on the link qualities. But all the internal routers use G star to forward the traffic. And the other scenario is when it's a transit traffic. It's a bit different than the previous scenario what I showed. It's still the same for AS1, but when it reaches the transit AS, router R3, which is a border router, would look through its fast path and attach a label to the traffic, and inject and push the traffic along the fast path. And all the other routers, instead of looking at its G-star forwarding table, because it's a transit traffic marked as transit, will go through the fast path forwarding table till it reaches the border egress border router, and then it's again G-star to the destination. Implementation so far. We have a working prototype on Click, which we can run on the Orbit nodes. And we have already validated it for small to medium topologies of 20-25 ASs. We have looked at the scalability, which I had shown before. We had also tested a few of the fast path scenarios. We also have implemented the protocol stack in NS3. And we have a custom simulator, and the aim is to use it for large-scale topologies, which is internet-scale topologies. It's very difficult to simulate 25K ASs or even try it out on Click nodes. So for scalability concerns, we do need to do some simulation of internet size using a custom simulator. We have also started looking at various data sets to find realistic topologies and realistic mobility patterns. So that's what we are doing now. Next, like I mentioned, we really need to do these scalability studies, which is essential for interdomain routing for an internet scale topology. We also want to analyze few of the use cases which I mentioned before, especially multi-homing and things like wireless edge peering. For that, we also need some realistic mobility tracers. So the idea would be to do a full-scale evaluation of internet scale topologies, and then to evaluate a few of the use case scenarios which I mentioned, and also to see that the scalability and overhead considerations are met. So that's it. Questions?